In this video, I'm going to be explaining Photoscape 2's new map functionality system called the timeline system. This system is now used for Photoscape 2 community maps to give maps their functionality. So, to make water rise or to make objects move, for example. We are currently in the README script that is provided in the Photoscape 2 map kit. When you click on this script, it will give you the documentation and it will give you all of the functions that timelines can do. I will try to explain what all this stuff means to the best of my knowledge. So let's first start at the top. We have timelines folder, which refers to the timelines folder right here, which should be just another folder inside your Photoscape 2 map model. If we open this folder, you should be able to see Legacy Trigger Timelines folder. And if you just open the Photoscape 2 kit for the first time, you should only be able to see one timeline. So let's go back here. A timeline is a configuration executes separately from other timelines and can nest in folders within timelines folder. So, for example, Legacy Trigger Timelines. Usually, when you first open this, will be where all the buttons are. So, button 1, for example, here is a timeline. If you see this little cog wheel icon, that means it's a timeline. Timelines have these attributes: trigger delay, trigger button, trigger timeline, and repeat on completion. Let's start at trigger delay. Trigger delay puts in the time and seconds when timeline begins to run. So for example, if you put here 5 seconds, it will take 5 seconds for this timeline to start running. Usually you want that at 0. Trigger button. A timeline will run if it has a trigger button. So for example, trigger button has a value of 1, meaning that this timeline will activate once button 1 is pressed. Trigger timeline is a string that runs timeline on completion of timeline with specified name. This means that a timeline can be triggered multiple times with this method. I believe what it's trying to say here is like, if once this timeline is complete and you put another timeline, then that timeline will start running. And then repeat on completion will repeat the timeline if you activate this little check mark right here. Inside timelines are X frames, which are object values. So let's head to timeline. Let's head to this timeline right here. And let's head to X frame underscore door 1. When you first open a timeline, you will see that all of these are probably named X frame. For me, I've changed the names of them. Inside an X frame, you will see a value. In this case, the value is underscore door 1. If you go back to the studio, and if we go here, and click here, this is door 1. So it's associated with here. If you want to associate a value, you just click this and click on the part you want associated with that value. If we head back to the README section, you'll see the main attributes of X frames: X frame timestamp, X frame length, X frame function, and X frame applied to descendants. Let's start at X frame timestamp. X frame timestamp is a number value, which is when the X frame will be triggered. So in this case, this X frame will be triggered 3 seconds after the map starts. X frame length is the duration of the X frame. So in this case, once this X frame is activated, it will last for 0.5 seconds. And then the X frame function is what it will be doing. In this case, it will be a move part function, meaning that this X frame will make the value move in a way. Let's skip down a bit to move part, since that's the function we will be using for this first example. We want to add a vector3 attribute translation here. And in this attribute, you will be putting the x, y, and z coordinates of how you want your value to move. In this case, I want my door to move 10 studs down. So I did for x 0, comma, -10 for the y, comma, 0 for Z. So in this case, after 3 seconds, door 1 will move down 10 studs and will last 0.5 seconds. For water, this is pretty much the same thing. You just have a translation to tell it how high it will go. So in this case, it will go up 30 studs, it will last 1 second, and it will start 12.5 seconds after the map has started. Let's head back to buttons. So here we can see where button 1 is. Button 1 is right here. There is a fade object value here, as I will be making the glass over here fade. There is a fall object value that will make this object fall, and the other fall object value is to make this object fall. And there is a sound object value that when placed with a sound ID, you can adjust the pitch, and the volume will play a noise once the button has been pressed. By default, all buttons should have an object value that has this sound ID. This sound ID plays the button activation sound that you hear once you press a button. I don't know if all buttons need this object value sound to have that little like ding sound, but it doesn't hurt to put it in all of them. So now that we know how to make objects move and how to make buttons do stuff, let's figure out how to do button functions. So as an example, what if we want this door to move once this button has been pressed? Well, first you have to duplicate another timeline. It can be the exact same name as the first timeline. In this timeline, you want an X frame for a value that you want to be manipulated. So in this case, I name this underscore door 2B. The B is for button. The value is for door 2. I want it to move down 10 studs in 0.5 seconds immediately once pressed. And to make sure that this will happen once button 2 is pressed, you go to its parent timeline and make sure that the trigger button string has the number 2. So once button 2 has been pressed, this timeline will activate and this door will immediately go down. That's how you do button functions. Let's head back to the README section and go back to all the different functions. Set water state. I do not know how to do that. However, CrazyBlocks has provided a video in his Discord server that shows this. Set properties. I have no idea how to work that either. Tween is too complicated for me. I prefer just using move part and just using the easing styles. For sound, you should just be able to make it into an object value X frame, and then put pitch, the sound ID, and the volume. Shake camera, or camera shake, I don't really mess with, and I don't really use, so I don't know how to do that. And alert. I don't really use alerts either, so I do not know how to do that. That is all my knowledge that I know at the moment of how to work the timeline system. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you for watching.